When we talk about the phrase when God says yes, no one can say no, the very foundation of that statement rests on the concept of divine authority. Divine authority means that God has the ultimate power, the highest form of governance, and the final word over everything that exists in creation. Unlike human authority, which is limited by laws, politics, culture, or personal bias, divine authority is boundless, eternal, and unquestionable. It is rooted in the belief that God is the creator and sustainer of all things, and therefore his word cannot be overturned or nullified. When God gives approval, it is not up for debate, it does not require confirmation from society, and it does not need validation from anyone else. His authority is not like a vote where majority opinion decides the outcome. His yes is absolute, unshakable, and final. To understand this practically, think about how human systems often operate. A person may apply for a job and be told a no because of qualifications, background, or even bias. A student might be denied admission into a university because someone on a committee doesn't believe they are good enough. An individual might face rejection in relationships, business opportunities, or dreams simply because other people place limits on them. But when God says a yes, he overrides every human system and every man-made boundary. His authority means he can open doors that others locked. He can make a way where there seems to be no way, and he can elevate someone who is counted out by the world. What man calls impossible, God declares possible because his authority governs above all. We see examples of divine authority throughout history and spiritual teachings. Consider how nations rise and fall, yet none of them exist outside the allowance of God's power. Kings and leaders may think they hold absolute control, but their reigns are temporary, while God's reign is everlasting. His authority is not threatened by politics, culture, or opinion. When God's hand is on a person, no system, no critic, and no adversary can undo that. This understanding gives us courage to face opposition, because we know that ultimate authority abides not in human approval, but in divine decision. Furthermore, divine authority teaches us humility. If God's yes is what determines destiny, then our role is not to depend on people for validation, but to seek alignment with Him. Too often we fall into the trap of trying to please everyone, working tirelessly to earn approval from bosses, family, or society. But when we recognize God's authority, we realize that the only approval that truly matters is His. If He says you are chosen, then no rejection can disqualify you. If He says you are blessed, then no curse can harm you. And if He says you are destined for greatness, then no opposition can block your path. His authority is the highest law, the ultimate decree, and the final verdict over your life. Faith over fear is one of the most transformative principles connected to the truth that when God says yes, no one can say no. Fear is one of the greatest tools that can hold a person back from walking in their divine purpose. It whispers lies, magnifies obstacles, and convinces people that they are not capable or worthy of what God has already promised. Faith, on the other hand, is the weapon that dismantles fear because it shifts our focus away from our limitations and places it on God's unlimited power. Faith is not the absence of challenges or doubts, but the decision to trust that God's word is greater than any opposition, rejection, or setback. When God has already given His yes, faith steps forward boldly, while fear retreats in the face of uncertainty. The reality is that fear often comes from external voices, the opinions of others, the possibility of failure, or the memory of past mistakes. People may tell you that you cannot achieve something, or circumstances may look so overwhelming that fear convinces you to give up before even trying. Yet faith responds differently. Faith remembers that if God has already approved, then no human voice or circumstance has the authority to overturn His decision. Faith declares, if God is for me, who can be against me? Fear says, what if I fail? But faith says, what if this is the very moment where God's promise comes alive? The difference is in what we choose to believe. Faith over fear is not just about positive thinking. It's about anchoring your trust in a source greater than yourself. Fear looks at the closed door and says, it's impossible. Faith looks at the same door and says, a God can open in His time. Fear says, you don't have the resources, the education, or the influence. Faith says, a God qualifies the unqualified and provides beyond what I can imagine. Faith is a lens that allows us to see beyond the visible reality and trust in the unseen power of God's yes. That yes is like a shield that protects us from fear because we know His plan cannot fail. Living with faith over fear also requires daily practice. Fear does not disappear overnight, and challenges will always arise to test our belief. But each time we choose faith, by taking a step forward despite the unknown, by speaking life instead of doubt, by holding on to hope even when nothing makes sense, we weaken the grip of fear. Over time, faith grows stronger and fear loses its influence. This is why so many great achievers, leaders, and spiritual examples lived courageously. They decided that faith in God's approval mattered more than fear of people's rejection. When we embrace faith over fear, we stop waiting for everyone's agreement before moving forward. We understand that fear will always say a no, but God has already said a yes. And that divine yes is enough to walk confidently into our purpose, knowing that nothing and no one can stop what God has already begun. Purpose alignment means bringing your life, your actions, and your decisions into harmony with the plan that God has already designed for you. Every individual is born with a unique purpose, and when God says yes to your destiny, it is because He has already written a plan that no one else can erase. However, the key to living in the fullness of that yes lies in aligning yourself with it. Too often, people live chasing goals that look good on the outside, but are not truly connected to their divine assignment. They end up frustrated, exhausted, or unfulfilled because they are pursuing something that was never meant for them. Alignment with purpose changes everything because it positions you exactly where God's favor and blessings are meant to flow. When you are aligned with His will, no obstacle can stop you, and no rejection can derail you because you're walking in a path that was designed specifically for you. Think of alignment like a key fitting into a lock. The wrong key, no matter how beautiful or well-made, will never open the door. In the same way, when we live outside of our divine purpose, we can push, force, and strive, but doors will remain closed because they were not meant for us. On the other hand, when we're aligned, God's yes, that becomes evident as doors open smoothly, opportunities flow naturally, and our gifts find the right environment to thrive. Alignment doesn't mean life will be without challenges, but it means you are exactly where you are supposed to be, and that assurance makes you resilient. One of the greatest benefits of purpose alignment is clarity. Many people live in confusion, unsure of their direction, and constantly shifting from one thing to another. But when you seek God's guidance and align your life with His plan, you begin to see with new eyes. Suddenly, what once looked impossible becomes possible because you are no longer chasing someone else's calling. You are embracing your own. That is why comparison is so dangerous. Looking at someone else's journey can make you feel inadequate. But when you are aligned, you realize that their path is theirs and yours is unique. God's yes for your life doesn't need to match anyone else's yes. Your assignment is tailored to who you are, and only you can fulfill it. Another important aspect of purpose alignment is peace. When you are living outside of your calling, there is often a sense of restlessness, like something is missing. But when you align with your purpose, there is an inner peace that goes beyond circumstances. Even when challenges come, you have confidence that you are exactly where God wants you to be. That peace fuels perseverance because you know that setbacks are not the end. They are part of the process of becoming who you are created to be. Ultimately, purpose alignment transforms life from a random pursuit into a meaningful journey. It shifts your mindset from asking, "What do I want?" "What has God designed me for?" And once you discover the answer and align your steps with it, you begin to live in the fullness of His yes. And no person, no rejection, and no circumstance can block you, because you are walking in divine alignment. And when you are aligned with purpose, everything else falls into place. Breaking human barriers is a vital part of understanding the truth that when God says yes, no one can say no. Human beings create limitations, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. These barriers can come in the form of societal expectations, cultural restrictions, prejudice, doubt, or even the opinions of those closest to. Many times people are told they cannot achieve something because of where they come from, what resources they lack, or what mistakes they have made in the past. But God's yes has the power to break through every one of those barriers because His authority is not confined by human rules. When he says yes, it does not matter how many people say no, how many doors are slammed shut, or how many systems are built to exclude you. His approval destroys limitations and makes a way even in the most impossible situations. Throughout history and even in everyday life, examples can be found of people who were told they would never succeed but went on to break barriers because God's hand was upon them. A person may grow up in poverty but still rise to influence because God's purpose for their life surpasses economic circumstances. Someone else may face rejection after rejection in their career but eventually step into a position that no one thought possible. Why? Because God's yes is not dependent on statistics, social class, or human permission. Barriers that seem permanent to us are temporary to Him. What walls try to block, God's will bulldozes through. Human barriers are often created out of fear, jealousy, or limited vision. People sometimes project their own insecurities onto others, saying you can't do that, not because it is impossible, but because they couldn't do it themselves. Others may put up barriers because they are threatened by your potential, and they fear what you will become if you succeed. But when God says yes, no amount of human fear or opposition can hold you back. He places you in situations that force people to recognize His power at work in your life, even if they never wanted to acknowledge it. His yes shatters stereotypes, dismantles prejudices, and proves that no limitation designed by man can silence His plan. Breaking human barriers also requires courage on our part. God can say yes, but we must be willing to step out in faith and push through the walls that others have. Sometimes barriers exist only because we believe them. The moment we realize that God's approval is greater than human rejection, those barriers lose their power. For example, someone told you're not qualified can still walk boldly into the opportunity knowing that God equips the call. Someone told your background disqualifies you can still rise because God uses the unlikely to accomplish the extraordinary in each case. It is yes that gives the strength to press forward. Ultimately, breaking human barriers is not about proving people wrong. It is about proving God right. It is about showing that His word stands above every limitation created by man. When His yes is on your life, barriers are not walls, they are stepping stones that reveal His core. What once seemed like an impossible blockade becomes the very testimony that shows others the undeniable power of walking in divine favor. The timing of God is one of the most important lessons connected to the truth that when He says yes, no one can say no. Many people expect God's yes to manifest immediately, but His approval is often tied to a specific season and purpose. His timing is not like human timing. It is perfect, deliberate, and aligned with what we can handle and what will glorify Him most. Too often, impatience leads people to doubt God's promises, thinking that His delay means denial. But delay is not denial. His yes is eternal, but its manifestation comes at the appointed time, and that time is always right, even if it feels late according to our human perspective. When we understand the timing of God, we learn to rest in faith, rather than be restless in fear. Think about how nature itself teaches this principle. Seeds do not sprout the moment they are planted. They must go through a process of rooting, growing, and developing before breaking through the soil. In the same way, God's promises often require preparation. If He released His blessings too early, we might mishandle them, waste them, or fail to appreciate them. But when the right season comes, His yes arrives in a way that cannot be stopped or questioned. The waiting season, therefore, is not punishment. It is preparation for the fulfillment of His word. A powerful example of God's timing can be seen in the story of Abraham and Sarah. God promised them a child, but years passed without seeing the manifestation. The human reasoning led them to think God's timing had failed, so they tried to make it happen on their own, which only created complications. Yet when the appointed time came, despite their old age, the promise was fulfilled exactly as God had declared. This reminds us that His timing is not bound by human limitations, and His yes does not expire because of delays. He knows the end from the beginning, and His timing ensures that everything falls into place in the right way. Living with trust in God's timing also builds resilience and patience. When we embrace the fact that His yes is already settled, We stop being anxious about the clock and start focusing on our growth. The waiting season becomes a time to strengthen faith, to develop character, and to prepare for the responsibility that comes with the blessing. Too many people want the platform without the process, the success without the struggle. But it is the waiting that refines us. When the breakthrough finally comes, it finds us ready, mature, and grateful. Ultimately, the timing of God teaches us to let go of control. It reminds us that He is never too early, never too late, but always right on time. His yes may take longer than expected, but it will never fail to arrive. And when it does, it will be undeniable, unstoppable, and perfectly aligned with His purpose. Trusting His timing gives us peace in the present and hope for the future, knowing that what He has promised will surely come to pass. Inner strength is one of the greatest outcomes of knowing that when God says yes, no one can say no. This strength is not physical. It is spiritual and emotional resilience that allows a person to keep moving forward, even when life gets tough. It is the kind of strength that does not depend on circumstances or people's approval, but rather on the assurance that God has already spoken favor over your life. When you are confident in His yes, you stop being shaken by every no you hear from the world. Instead of collapsing under pressure, you stand taller, because you know that God's word carries more weight than human rejection. Inner strength is the quiet power that keeps you grounded when storms come, the fuel that enables you to endure trials, and the courage that empowers you to rise again after setbacks. What makes inner strength so vital is that life will always bring challenges. People may criticize you, doors may close, and you may face seasons where nothing seems to be working. Without inner strength, these challenges can crush a person's spirit and make them give up. But with inner strength, rooted in God's approval, you develop resilience. You begin to see rejection not as a permanent end, but as redirection towards something greater. You stop being overly dependent on people's validation, because your confidence comes from a higher source. This kind of strength keeps you from giving up halfway, because you understand that the final outcome has already been sealed by God's yes. Inner strength also transforms the way you handle fear and uncertainty. When you know God has said yes, you don't panic in the face of opposition. You may still feel nervous or unsure, but that underlying assurance anchors you. It's like a tree with deep roots. Storms may shake its branches, but the roots keep it firmly in place. In the same way, inner strength keeps you grounded in faith, even when everything around you feels unstable. This stability allows you to think clearly, make wise decisions, and persevere with determination instead of being paralyzed by fear. Another important aspect of inner strength is that it gives you courage to take risks. Many people miss out on opportunities because they are afraid of failure or rejection. But when you are confident that God has already said yes, you take bold steps forward, knowing that His favor goes before you. Even if setbacks come, inner strength gives you the ability to rise again. You stop seeing failure as the end and start viewing it as part of the journey towards success. This is why people with inner strength inspire others, because their resilience becomes a testimony that God's GSA cannot be stopped by temporary obstacles. Ultimately, inner strength is a gift that comes from trusting God's authority over your life. It empowers you to keep going when others quit, to hold your head high when others doubt you, and to pursue your calling with confidence. It is proof that the strongest battles produce the strongest warriors. And when you live with this inner strength, you not only walk boldly in God's yes, but you also become a beacon of encouragement for others who are still learning to trust His power. Living testimony is the visible evidence of God's power at work in a person's life. It is when your story, your journey, and your breakthroughs become a witness to others that when God says yes, no one can say no. A testimony is not just about what you say, it is about what people see happening in your life. When you overcome obstacles that were supposed to defeat you, when you rise from situations where others expected you to fail, and when you achieve things that seemed impossible, your life itself becomes the proof of God's authority. You no longer have to convince people with arguments because the evidence speaks louder than words. A living testimony is like a light that cannot be hidden. It shines so brightly that others cannot help but notice. What makes a living testimony so powerful is that it is undeniable. People may doubt your abilities, criticize your decisions, or even mock your dreams. But when God's yes manifests in your life, the results silence the doubters. Your success, your resilience, and your blessings become the answer to every antidote spoken over you. For example, someone who was told they would never succeed academically but goes on to graduate with honors becomes a living testimony. Someone who was counted out because of their past but rises to become a leader or influencer shows the undeniable truth of God's favor. The beauty of being a testimony is that you don't have to fight every critic. Your life becomes the response. Living testimony also serves a greater purpose beyond personal achievement. It inspires others. When people see how God's yes has carried you through, it encourages them to believe that the same can happen for them. Many people struggle with doubt, fear, and discouragement, but seeing someone else walk in victory ignites hope. It tells them, if God did it for them, He can do it for me too. This ripple effect is one of the reasons why testimonies are so powerful. They spread faith, courage, and belief, often reaching hearts that words alone could never touch. Your story might be the very thing that gives someone else the strength to keep going. Another dimension of being a living testimony is humility. It is not about boasting or taking credit for yourself, but pointing back to God as the source of your success. When people admire your strength, you acknowledge that it is His strength in you. When they applaud your achievements, you remind them that it was His yes that made it possible. This humility not only honors God, but also makes your testimony relatable. People can see that it's not about being perfect or having all the resources, but about trusting the one whose approval outweighs all opposition. Ultimately, being a living testimony means your life becomes a sermon that others can read without you speaking a word. Every victory, every breakthrough, and every blessing becomes evidence that God's yes is unstoppable. Your story declares that rejection is not the end, that barriers can be broken, and that purpose can be fulfilled against all odds. And in living this truth, you inspire others to trust the power of God's yes, knowing that if He has done it for you, He can surely do it for them as well.